Lab-grown meat has the same composition as traditional meat. Current livestock are reared in concentrated animal feeding facilities, and so there are environmental concerns. So we are inspired by Wagyu steak, which has a high lipid content and this beautiful lipid marbling.
Okay, I'm sure by now you've heard of lab-grown meat, but have you ever wondered what it actually is or how is it even produced? Well, today we have an episode of Teach Me in 10 with Dr. Rosalyn Abbott, an associate professor at Carnegie Mellon University, who's going to explain how cultivating meat reduces the environmental, public health and food security issues of traditional meat production. So what is lab-grown meat and how does it differ from traditional meat production?
Lab-grown meat is a product that has been developed in the lab to emulate the properties of traditional meat products. So it takes techniques that were originally developed for regenerative medicine, for creating human tissues, and it utilizes those techniques to create animal tissues. And so the end product really should be the same as the traditional process, but it's just the method in which it was created is a little bit different because we are growing just the tissue of interest and not the entire animal. And so current livestock are reared in concentrated animal feeding facilities. And so there are environmental concerns, there's food security concerns, there's safety concerns with the way they're reared. And cultured meat can really try to get around a lot of those issues because we won't sacrifice as many animals, we'll use less land, there'll be fewer greenhouse gas emissions, water consumption. It has the potential to increase energy efficiency. Cultured meat also has the advantage that really it can be grown in a matter of weeks to months as opposed to traditional livestock where you're growing the whole animal, which takes years to develop.
So can you explain the concept of cellular agriculture and its role in creating lab-grown meat?
Cellular agriculture is the process of using cells to manufacture things. Cells are really good at making things. In the body, cells will secrete extracellular matrix proteins and they multiply to form tissues. So in the lab, what we're doing is just instructing the cells to do that same process. We use soluble factors as the cues to guide them down the tissue of interest. And so we can have them manufacture this tissue without having to grow the entire animal.
How does your research utilize 3D printing to produce lab-grown meat? And what advantages does this method offer?
So my lab is exploring the use of 3D printing to create the structure in cultured meat products. So we are inspired by Wagyu steak, which has a high lipid content and this beautiful lipid marbling. And so we are using the 3D printer to try to recreate that structure. So we took an MRI actually of a Wagyu or a slice of Wagyu steak, and we used that as our blueprint. And we modified a plastic printer so that we can actually print cells in our bioink. And so our bioink is composed of alginate, which is an edible emulsifier that really just thickens the bioink. And then we add in cells. And so we can put in adipocytes, which are those lipid-laden cells that give the flavor into one syringe. And then we can add skeletal muscle, which is more of the structure of the steak, into another syringe. And so we can recreate that structure by following that blueprint from the MRI. And so that's where we're really trying to focus on kind of these higher end meat products that people are going to want to eat and will pay more money actually for as well. So that could help with trying to create the financial viability within this field. And so that's really where we're starting for is trying to use 3D printing to recreate these higher structured tissues for cultured meat products.
What are the primary challenges in replicating the texture and flavor of conventional meat lab-grown alternatives?
So my lab is interested in tissue engineering, and originally we were more in the regenerative medicine space, looking to try to create tissues for filling like defects in our subcutaneous layer, or developing like disease models. We were interested in like lipid accumulation in hepatocytes, which are in the liver, in fatty liver disease. And so now we've kind of moved into this space where we're looking to add lipid content to these meat products. products. And so much of the field focused originally just on skeletal muscle and fibroblasts, and so it didn't have that lipid component. And so that's where we really have been focusing our expertise on, is trying to create high lipid content with good fatty acids. We started with Wagyu steak because it has a really nice lipid profile. And so that's where we're headed as far as adding more flavor to these meat products. So the big challenges in the field currently are really the infrastructure that's required to grow this large number of cells to create the biomaterials that the cells are going to grow on. There's a lot of work in bioreactor development because you're going to need to grow tons and tons of cells for even a small piece of meat. So making sure that we can do that efficiently in a cost-effective way. Also, a big cost within this manufacturing process is growing the cells in the media. So media right now, those soluble factors that are required to really push the cells down the different lineages are very expensive, and they've been developed for the regenerative medicine space. And so they're pharmaceutical grade. And so we need to work on potentially trying to create more food grade soluble factors, growth factors, so that can decrease the cost of media. And then there's a lot of focus on regulatory pathway and making sure that the safety is met, and making sure that all the products really go through that regulatory pathway, and developing kind of a way for them to get it through.
How do you address consumer concerns regarding the safety and nutritional value of lab-grown meat products?
Lab-grown meat has the same composition as traditional meat. It has proteins, it has lipids, and so the nutritional content should be the same. And actually controlling the environment by growing it in a lab, we have greater control over safety and contaminants, for example. And so actually, in many ways, cell-cultured meat can actually potentially be more nutritious because we can tailor the lipid content and the protein content, and it has the potential to be more safe because we can really control that environment more in a lab.
Okay, so how do you envision the future of lab-grown meat in the global food industry, and what hurdles remain to its widespread adoption?
The current agricultural supply chain is unable to meet the increasing demand for animal proteins that we currently face. And so I envision cell-cultured meat as another option for consumers to offset the environmental impacts of our current traditional agricultural system, just giving more options to people when they go to the store. And so I don't envision that it will ever replace our traditional farming, but just offset it. And so there are currently companies right now that have already gone through the regulatory pathways, and products will be hitting the shelves soon. And so I think a big area that we'll have to improve on as a field is really the consumer acceptance and making sure they know what the product is, and that it's safe, it has the same properties as other traditional meat products, and so it's a safer way and potentially better for the environment for eating those meat proteins. So next steps for the field, I think the field is really focusing on trying to develop new products. So currently there are chicken products that have been approved, but people are also working on beef products. There's also different fish companies, and we've worked in that space a little bit as well. So thinking about something like a salmon fillet that has a really nice lipid profile is something that my lab is interested in. And so kind of expanding the choices in this field, and also working on trying to decrease the cost is a big focus. As the field is so young, we need momentum, we need early adventurous connoisseurs to try these new meat products so that we can increase the demand and make these available for more consumers everywhere.
Thank you for joining us in another episode of Teach Me in 10. Until next time.